So to go to the history of the violin, unlike other instruments in the string family, especially the viola and the double bass, which took more time to evolve and still have more variation in shape and size even to this day, the violin in its current shape and basic setup was really standardized by the late 16th century. So it's a strong, beautiful, durable shape that allows for a gorgeous sound. And if you would look at a violin made in 1690 and one made today, you wouldn't see, just at first glance, you would not see big differences. The color of the varnish might give it away because that's something that ages. But the shape and structure would really be extremely similar. The kinds of variations that occur are usually between different makers, different regions, and those can give some clues to a violin's identity, but not even really necessarily the age. The scroll, this part at the top of the violin, is kind of the art piece of the instrument, the area where the maker gives a more unique and personal flair, and so those are sometimes parts of the violin. I've got a couple of instruments here that I'll be showing throughout this that we look for kind of more personalization from the maker. The violin first emerged in northern Italy, in cities of Venice and Genoa, cities that had ties to Asia through trade routes that were part of the Silk Road. And there are several ancestors of the violin from the Middle East and the Byzantine Empire, three in particular that are a direct link to the development of the violin. I'll show some images now of those instruments. So the first one is called the rebec. This is an instrument derived from the Byzantine lyra and the Arabic rebab. And you can see that this only has 3 strings, this instrument, and it's a fairly simple shape, and that the bow looks fairly crude. It really looks like kind of a stick with horsehair attached in some holes in it. So that's the rebab. Then the second instrument, that's the ancestor of the violin, is the medieval fiddle or vielle. Here we see some paintings of that instrument. So you see it has more strings, although maybe different amounts of strings. And it's, again, a shape that looks a little bit more kind of like a Baroque guitar might look today. And the bow looks maybe slightly more refined than the rebec bow that we saw. Here's another image of that one, the medieval vielle. And then the third instrument that's a descendant of the violin is called the Lira De Brachio. And this is a more ornate instrument, well, especially this particular photo. I love that face on the back of this one. So those are the instruments that are considered the direct ancestors of the violin. The earliest description of the violin that we have is from a publication from Lyon, dated 1556, and the oldest surviving violin is from 1560. This is from a set of 24 violins that the French king Charles IX ordered from Amati. Now, you might even recognize that name. The maker or the maker family, Amati, is one of the kind of in the top 10 violin makers that have ever existed. So it's interesting to see that some of the earliest examples of the instrument also coincide with some of the best makers. It was really an instrument that found its form and became what we know today very quickly. And there are many surviving instruments from the Amati family of makers. And note that most of the famous violin maker names that you've probably heard many times, Stradivarius, of course, Guarneri, Amati, these are actually families of makers. So violin making was very much a multi-generational artisanal trade that had a long education and sort of internship period and tended to stay in families for many generations.